What is good? We're back. And today we've got a model on our hands, a really good model on our hands. And it's all the work
maybe the best
of this man, Joseph from Quality Stats. What's good, Joseph? How you doing, man? And you know, fresh cracks because we might as well get drunk because we're talking numbers.
Well, thank you very much. Things are going good. I have a background in statistics. I got my bachelor's of science in statistics from the University of Georgia. I worked for an NFL agency helping predict player success, and I currently write data science articles for PFF for in-season projections. And, I made a model and y'all wanted to talk about it. So here we are.
Yeah, man.
There it is. There's the R2.
We found
the one and only.
We found you on the Twitters, and you had some very solid work, a lot of in-depth, and maybe one of the better scores that you could possibly produce. So we figured why not bring you on and discuss said scores.
If you have a better one or know of a better one, please hit us in the comment section below.
Yeah. So let's talk. We're going to talk good and bad, but let's start the show by talking players that the model likes maybe over consensus.
Yeah, as far as my R squared is a 0.47. That's one of the best pre-draft R squareds that you can get.
That does not include draft capital.
It does not include draft capital.
A crazy score to not include draft capital.
Yeah, it does not include draft capital. And so I think that as we go through these scores and as we discuss everything, it's important to take that draft capital into consideration in your own head. Take that landing spot into consideration in your own head, and understand, if the player scored really well in the model doesn't know what team it landed on, the player landed on, and it doesn't know what, where the player was taken in the draft. So the model doesn't know those things, and that's where we can use our human input and, gain an edge over the model and over other people.
Yeah. All right. So if there was one player in particular in the model who you say jumps out more than consensus than any other player, who would you say that would be?
I think by far that has to be Luther Burden, the third. I think as y'all call him sometimes. He has just a fantastic profile according to my model. He has the best career score. That's a career production score that I created out of anyone in the class. Meaning he really excelled when he was on the field. He produced against good competition. He did it while he was young. He's still a young player being drafted. And, using our own human information, we know that he went to a pretty good landing spot in Chicago, and he was drafted with solid draft capital. Not necessarily amazing draft capital, but pretty solid draft capital. And so, he ended up in a fantastic situation while also having a really good analytics foundation. Mm-hmm. And, he grades out as by far the best producer in my model.
Looking for more FFD? Get access to our proprietary ADP, our Dynasty rankings, the rookie draft kit, and extra shows every single week. Head over to patreon.com/the FF Dynasty and hit us with that $5 holler. Right. So if you're watching on the YouTube page, I've done put together these rookie pages. You can get them over on the patreon.coms. It's got our rankings incorporated. It's got statistics, seasonal rankings and stuff like that. And then we did our own, correlations. And what Joseph's done here is kind of taking it to the next level, right? I show you all these things about production. His production score essentially in this model combines them all kind of together into one score. So I did a bunch of individual correlations, which is, if nothing individually correlates that much. You have to put things together. And the model that Joseph put together, 0.47 to try and beat it.
I think, a good way to think about statistics and these correlations and R-squareds is kind of like a piece to a puzzle, right? Your entire puzzle is getting 100% R-squared. You would be able to perfectly predict every single player going into the NFL, no matter what, if you were able to achieve 100% of your puzzle, right? But like yards per route run or college dominator or yards per reception, whatever you're looking at, right? Those stats all are some piece of that puzzle. They're a small percentage of that puzzle. And a model really does a good job of correlating all of those together into one kind of cohesive, large piece to the puzzle, right? It combines all this information And the more puzzle you can solve, the closer you get to one. And my model was able to solve about 47% of the puzzle.
So I guess this is a good time, real quick, for the viewers watching on YouTube, which if you're listening on the podcast, go check out the page where we're showing some cool stuff here. So this is a graph of Joseph's 2025 wide receiver model. We're workshopping the name. Hit us in the comments for suggestions. But this is that's on the x-axis, and the y-axis is your 3-year average of points per game from the NFL, right? And then you have all these data plots, and those are players. And then you have this trend line. And what R squared is the distance from each dot to that line, the average of that, right? And so 0.47 is basically counting for 47% of the variance of the correlation between his model and points produced in the NFL.
Fantastic explanation. Good
nice.
job.
I've been working on it for months, so I nailed it. But my question is in general, a 0.47 correlation score is not that good in general, right? Like, it's the best you could do predicting NFL points. But if you Google, like, what's a good correlation score, it's going to say like 0.7, right? Or something like that.
It depends on what you're doing. Yeah. So with like R squareds and you've been using correlation and R squared are slightly different, but I'll let it be. But with R squared, right, a great R squared would be 0.99, right? If you're doing a scientific experiment, if you're in like physics or you're an engineer or something and you're working on an experiment, you really need your R squared to be like 0.99 in your experiments you're running, because that 0.01 is friction usually, right? Or air resistance or something. Like, we expect the fundamental laws of nature to go a certain way. But the less and less confident we get in a field, the more and more we're willing to accept a lower R squared. So in fields like sociology or psychology, a 0.1 R squared is considered amazing, right? A 10% R squared, you might have solved humanity if you get a 10% R squared in a field like that, right? And in a field like football, the FFD. Yeah, and in a field like football, where things are always changing, they're always moving, and they're very complex. We have 11 players interacting with 11 other players. People have their own personal lives. Things change. Conditioning, just like a million different things go on. And in a field like that, 0.47 is really, really good, right? And being able to, predict that with some level of confidence is an incredibly good feat to achieve.
Do you love the mock draft? Are you interested in helping us update our monthly ADP? If so, be sure to join the free Discord channel or sign up for a free Patreon membership to become part of the Pleasure Chest community. Better mock it up so you don't fuck it up.
Now, when you move to players already in the NFL, how different does that score change? You know what I mean? Like,
what do you mean?
Like, things correlate more when you're talking NFL to NFL year, right? We're trying to predict college success for the NFL.
This would be rookies coming from college into pro. Now, when you're already in the NFL year to year, you can get that a little closer, a little better of a number.
100%. Yeah. If I was to, like, I haven't done this, but if I were to say use this last year, the 2024 rookies class numbers, and then add them to the model that I had, like previously for the 2024 year, if I were to use that as one number to predict their first year in the NFL, it would have likely higher than a 0.47 R squared. It would be pretty solid. And that's how, the more and more information you have from the NFL, the better and better your predictions are going to be in the NFL.
Gotcha. Okay. And so what would be the big kind of stats that you've combined here to really set your metric or your model apart from maybe some other things that people see?
It's a great question. So one of the things I think I'm most proud of is, the main table that we looked at earlier has a career score, explosive score, beast yards, and WAA, which is wins above average, right? I think the thing I'm most proud of is the career score percentage. That was a very complex calculation. It probably took 70% of my time while I was making this model. But the basic idea, the underlying idea of that is that I created a season score for every season that every player played that ran at least 100 routes during the season. And I incorporated things like their yards per team pass attempt, their college dominator, their receiving touchdowns relative to their team, right? Their just all the things you could include in a production, right?
Right. All of the stats that a lot of the analytical people just point to that one thing that, because if you read through the Substack, you don't see the term breakout age. You don't see college dominator, but the idea behind the youth and the production is very much so built into the model, just at a much more, granular and in-depth way.
Exactly. Yeah. So the way that, breakout age and all those things that you're talking about, all the main things that everyone talked about, it's incorporated in this career score using, I would group players by, say, their age and their conference and where they were located. I discounted production when they were playing kind of lower rated teams. Like if you're playing a Power 5 team, that's different than when you're playing a group of 5 team, right? Or if you're playing a Division 3 school. And so I discounted production when that happened. And ultimately I used what's called principal components analysis, and combined all of those things that those scores that people care about into a single score, right? Relative to the player's age and relative to the player's conference that they were located in. And each season that every player played was given a score, right? So Luther Burden, bring it back to him a little bit. He ended up having a 96th percentile sophomore season, right? He had a really, really good sophomore season. Yeah. And that is driving up his career score because he did that while he was a sophomore, right? He had a fantastic year against good competition. He played, he's playing in the SEC. He did it against good teams while he was young. And the model really cares about that. The career score really cares about doing that while you're young. And that's what makes him stand out in this class so heavily.
Right. In 2023, he ranked 10th in targets with 117, 10th in receptions, 83, 10th in yards, 1,194, 8 touchdowns, averaged 20.9 points a game, good for 13th and 12th overall in total fantasy points. Just slaying there.
And he did that while he was 19. Yeah, he did that while he was 19 and he was in the SEC.
Right.
What I'm curious about, and maybe we need to move off Burden here, but we're getting through a lot, is kind of some of these stats that you've put together, and beast yards in particular with Luther Burden to me don't make sense in because he seems so good after the catch and in space. And if we look at the definition of beast yards, it's total yards gain on passes that were 5 or more yards in the air. We're talking about air yards, and where the wide receiver gained more than 5 yards after contact. Right. You would say that Luther Burden is pretty electric with the ball in his hands.
One
and
of my favorites
catch,
for sure.
Right. So how does us seeing how electric he is on the field, but such a low beast score, and then the fact that it is low, how much does that impact? Obviously, he's number one, so it's not too bad that one in particular stat is low.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess about his beast yards before anything. So beast yards is a stat I created. It has a pretty solid correlation. I don't remember the exact one, but it accounted for 0.02 new variance. Some people know what that means, but don't really worry about it. 0.315 is pretty solid, right? That's actually a pretty good beast yards number. It's just Tre Harris. If we want to get into some other players, Tre Harris just has such a good beast yards, his 0.777, that it makes Luther Burden's look a little lower, right? Because everything's conditionally formatted. But if you look at Tet or Ibuka, or, he had a similar one to Jayden Higgins, and, his was a good amount better than Travis Hunter and Restrepo, right? Luther Burden's beast yards is actually pretty solid, and he had a lot of targets. He ran a lot of routes.
Right.
And the fact he was able to keep up a pretty solid beast yards number, that's probably where that is coming from, right? He ran a lot of routes, and he was very good at a lot of what he did. And 0.315 is nothing to snuff at.
Yeah. So, all right.
Tre Harris was just that dude.
Right.
So.
When Luther Burden's just blinking red in your model of you got to get him, how much do you now, in your personal dynasty league or whatever redraft, however you want to look at it, do you all right, well, the situation could be really good, but there's a lot of mouths to feed there. So how much do you discount any of that, or does that feed into anything, or is that just more you now have to maybe apply a little bit of context of kind of the situation and bump things down? Or do you just say, hey, I know all this stuff really, and I'm just going to let the cream rise at the top here?
I definitely, some version of both of those. I think that probably 80% of the latter. I definitely think talent rises, right? Talent, sure. When it is there, it wins. And Brock Bowers, I think, is a really good example of a player that, for reference, in my model last year, Brock Bowers came out as the 100th percentile wide receiver last year, right? Yeah. He was my wide receiver 1. And
if you can pan the camera down a little bit, what does that on your shirt say?
Oh, sorry. Blue Dogs. But,
it says New Alabama, I think.
Yeah. But to be fair, this had nothing to do with it. He was the wide receiver 1. And, talent rises. Even if it's in a bad situation, talent will rise. But I do, there is some context, right? If you end up, in a team like Chicago is a great example of a team where there are a lot of mouths to feed. But I also think that under a new coaching regime, there's a non-zero chance some players may get traded or that roles are going to change, right? And Luther Burden was their wide receiver of choice. And I think that will end up mattering in the end.
All right. So we've got Luther Burden, Superflex, tight end premium at 203 ahead of, and I'm sure we'll get to some of these guys so you don't have to kill the guys that you don't like because we're going to talk about some of them. But Matthew Golden, Ebuka, two guys that are habitually drafted ahead of Luther Burden. Is that just a no-brainer for you to just say, I'm taking Luther Burden over those guys?
I think it's an absolute no-brainer for me for taking Luther Burden over Golden. I think that is just a no question for me. And we can get into that later. But I think Ebuka, it gets a lot closer. When we start talking about, where does he fall around Ebuka? Because Ebuka, I think, was a pretty solid model player and got really good draft capital. And I think is in a little bit of a more immediate situation than Burden, or at least it seems that way. I think they're very close. I think, in my opinion, Burden should be closer to like the 112 or 111. Like they should be, around each other. But yeah, I think that no doubt in my mind, I'm taking Burden over Golden all day long.
How would you like it if we paid your 2025 league entry fee? All you have to do is submit proof of a 5-star review from Spotify and or iTunes, click the link, and fill out the entry form. Multiple entries allowed. In fact, come into your friend's phone to quadruple your chances to win. Each losing entry will automatically roll over to the next most contest, all for your pleasure.
Well, you mentioned Tre Harris and that ridiculous B score, and you can kind of see in the illustration that we're showing on YouTube here that there's a lot of green boxes on the Tre Harris front. And, I got to say, all of a sudden, I really like analytics because Luther Burden and Tre Harris are two of my favorite guys.
Proper fucking nation bias, baby.
So, tell us a little bit about Tre Harris and what the model likes about him and what makes him so unique to maybe the situation in general. I think he seems like a unique analytic guy here at Tre Harris, at least.
Yeah, I think the definition of Tre Harris is just explosiveness. Simply, right? He is as explosive as it gets. I think it might be the top B score out of anybody in like the entire data set. He had a fantastic BC yards per route run. His overall explosiveness score is in the 95th percentile, which is, elite, truly elite. And on top of all that, he was productive the entire time he played college football, right? He was always productive, which really just leads to an elite prospect, right? He was, I think, a smidge older and his route versatility wasn't quite as good, but those aren't deal breakers, right? So like Jamar Chase, for instance, did not have the best route versatility coming out of college. Yeah. And he's pretty good because of how explosive he is, right? I
can't imagine Brian Thomas's was super high either.
Exactly. It wasn't high either, right? And the thing is he's explosive, right? He's very good. Right. He's explosive.
Your route versatility is the run down the field, make big plays. And so I think that's interesting. We could talk about the route versatility score, right? So that's kind of like reception perception all wrapped into one model, right? That
was my goal, right? I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw Matt Harmon reception perception, and I was like, man, that seems so cool. I kind of want that to be in my model, but you can't really just throw all of the numbers into the model, like all the different routes they run and all those different numbers, and kind of hope it works. So I had to create my own thing, and that's where I created what I call RVI, or the Route Versatility Index, which is simply a consolidation of how well a player ran all the different routes that they ran while they were in college, how well they ran those routes into a single score, right? And so one of the things that I count heavily in this is their route diversity, right? Are they running a lot of different routes, and are they running those routes well? Because if you're just running slants over and over and over again, I can't really reward you for that, right? I want to see you run, all the different routes in the route tree and reward players that are doing that. And so that counts, that's a pretty important variable in my model. And that's a, stat I came up with last year. And I use some proprietary PFF data to derive all of that.
Right. So I was going to say, if you're wondering like, well, how do you know how each route that he ran, and, how he's basically, working with PFF, he's got the supreme package of statistical, data, and he knows how deep each route was ran, where it was ran, the distance the defender was from him at the point of the catch, who that defender was. And he's taking into account coverage models and PFF grades. And these aren't just like him throwing pasta at the wall and seeing what sticks. His model and the regression analysis tells him which, because I was like, hey, are you maybe giving PFF score too much credit? And he's like, I'm not giving anything any credit. The model identifies which is the most important stat. So I'd love to hear questions. I have questions as I listen. Joseph and I have been chatting and collaborating for a little while, and I'm just trying to learn and come up on this, and it's just it's trying to normalize this and then whittling it down to the value, right? That's like kind of the thing is like maybe we've identified for people what an R squared score is, but like what's in this graph, this chart, the color coded one that I need to be paying attention to that's going to give me the guys I need to hit. And then, let's take a look at the ADP. Tre Harris, for instance, where's he at?
206, maybe 204, 205.
206.
Yeah.
Is that too low? You taking Tre Harris over Cam Scatabo?
That's a close one for me. I never did a running back model this year, but I've heard good things about Scatterbo. So, but I think that I would probably take Tre Harris over him, to be honest. If I wasn't like in desperate need of a running back or anything, if I'm just drafting pure talent here, I would rather have Tre Harris over Cam Scatterbo. Yeah.
I could be needing the most running backs I've ever needed, and I'm still taking Tre Harris over Cam Scatterbo. So in your, there's some pushback on Tre Harris because of, that early part of the schedule where he was playing a lot of games and then missed some time. He did bounce back with a couple of good games, but you had Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Georgia Southern all in there where he did a lot of work in, so how much do you decrease what he did in those games? Does that make sense? How much? Yeah, how are you waiting all that out and waiting through those? I know you had to mention something about level of competition before.
Yeah.
So he does bounce back against LSU and puts up 7 for 102, 3 for 81 against South Carolina, 11 for 176 against Kentucky.
And all of those are going to count significantly more than his production against worse competition, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that isn't changed really in my model is the BC yards per route run. That's just a simple derivation. I didn't standardize that or anything. It is just that BC yards is the definition of, if they had a catch over 5 air yards and then they had 5 yards after contact, I didn't change that based off who they played against.
Yeah.
But the other production metrics, the percentiles and everything else is accounted for with level of competition. And Tre Harris still produced when he was younger, and he still produced against good teams. And that's how he got a pretty good career score. And that's why, some reasons why it wasn't as elite as Luther Burden's is he didn't do it quite as young, right? He didn't do those things when he was Luther Burden, when Luther Burden was doing it when he was 19.
Yeah, I think was he at Louisiana Tech before this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So not quite as early of a breakout and maybe down. And then, so when he was at Louisiana Tech, does some of those bigger games that he had maybe count a little less aggressively than against the SEC?
Correct. Yeah. So it is about who you play as an opponent, like who your opponent is. So if your opponent is a group of 5 team, I discount your production pretty heavily, right? I discount it about, I'm not going to give away exact numbers, but, at least a quarter, right? I'm going to discount you. Every yard is not really worth a yard. It's worth about a 0.7 of a yard.
Sure.
Just as an example.
And how you get to that decision is not just a random choice. You move the needle a little bit, do the correlation, see how much the score changes, and you do it. And then if you go too far, it starts to go in the opposite direction, and you get to just whittle it down. So, how many hours do you think you put in to developing the model?
Well, so, I've been doing this for about 7 to 8 years. I make a model every year. I like to do this. I like to make a model from scratch every year. It's kind of my off season to do. I like to do this just to get my head back in the football space and get, started on next season projections and stuff like that. And this is how I start it every year. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of these concepts from the past. But this is the first year where I did the changing everything, discounting group of 5 production. And, I have automated ways of doing it, right? I can do stepwise ways of doing it and check what does 100% look like? What does 90% look like? What does 80% look like? And so on. and then look at where my R squareds go and see like what are my error rates, like how does that all look, and then I can come to a more appropriate number after I do that.
100 hours.
Probably, I mean, maybe around there, probably 50 to 100.
Correlated over the years and factor in the learning curve. And
Oh yeah, if we had all the years up, hundreds of hours. If we had all 7 to 8 years up, we're talking hundreds of hours.
All right, who's the next guy we got to get to?
Real quick, you can find them at Quality Sports on
Quality
Twitter.
Stats.
Quality Stats. Sorry.
Quality Stats.
At Quality Stats on the Twitters. If you want more of this, and he has a Substack and a Patreon, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't advertise it too much, but yeah my Substacks, it's been going off pretty well, and that's where you can find a really detailed analysis of all of this and some players I like and why I like them, and really breaking it down into a more intricate detail.
Hey guys, be sure to give us a follow on the Twitters, Instagrams, and TikToks. Slide into those DMs and help us beat the algorithm up. Let's go. Back to the show.
As far as next players, Jayden Higgins, I think, is an absolute monster. He actually grades out as the best player in the entire class for his wins above average, which is a PFF-derived metric. Eric Eager created wins above replacement at PFF a long time ago. But wins above average is basically a culmination of a player's PFF grades and how they impact their team's winning chance. How much did that player contribute to their team winning games using PFF grades? And so it's really a good all-encompassing measure of a player's, I guess, PFF ability and how much they contributed to their team. Jayden Higgins had the best score in the entire class, right? He was the number one contributor to his team winning games out of any wide receiver in this class. And he also has a really good route versatility score, and really just comes out as an all-around fantastic prospect, and he had a good landing spot.
Did you know he played basketball?
He did. I did. Yeah, no, I think
everyone plays basketball. It's just a joke.
Yeah. Another favorite of ours here at the show, Jayden Higgins.
I know we're just coming out with bangers,
but it's I don't know. A lot of this comes down to, I don't know. I think there's a lot of common sense in these guys as far as if you actually paid attention to them. Like everything that you're saying that your model is kind of telling you that they do is all there, right? The versus like Jayden Higgins being all around really good in a lot of different situations. If you watch the fit, like he can be your big slot, he can play outside, he's decent after the catch, he can run a bunch of different routes, he can stack you up vertically. So like there's a whole bunch of different things that Jayden Higgins can do, and why he's been one of our favorites. And then there was some decent analytics, and then you come over the top with a bunch of these combined kind of scores here to really sum it up. Obviously confirmation bias on our part on these couple of guys, but to me, those are like three of the guys that just really stuck out in this class of just doing things at a different level than I think other players do. I think that with Jayden Higgins, his only knock in my profile was that he wasn't quite as productive when he was young. I should say he wasn't quite as productive against elite competition while he was young, but he really, he solved that later in his career, and he's got all the best signs that you could really want outside of maybe being as explosive as Tre Harris. So right. All right, let's go to like maybe a little bit more sleeper version of this, and I know who the guy is here. So he was one of my kind of favorites leading up to the draft. He's kind of fallen down the board a little bit for everybody for good reason. UDFA, I believe at this point, right? Undrafted. Yep. Signed with Tennessee, goes back with Cam Ward, his college quarterback. So that's like some fun little dots to connect there. But this guy, he's just had consistently 1,000-yard receiver, great route runner.
Who are we talking about?
Xavier Restrepo, right? And it seems to be one of your favorites, is kind of like a sleeper that the model really likes.
Yeah, I can't believe he did not get drafted, to be honest. I mean, I know he ran like a 4.8, but I did not think that would cause him to go undrafted. I think. And as you can see from the table that I shared, his PFF big board ranking, which is just PFF's overall draft rankings, right?
Sure.
That's just where they rank players. They thought he was 76th overall, right? And he did not get drafted, which is pretty insane.
Yeah.
I think for his future productivity in the NFL, it's actually really good that he ended up with Cam Ward and the Titans. I'm sure Cam Ward will be pushing for his involvement and hoping that happens. And I think as, in a pretty depleted wide receiver room at the Titans, I think that Restrepo could maybe make a name for himself.
Yeah. I mean, I think you probably need some things to break your way when you're an undrafted free agent, right? And but you having your quarterback is great for you to kind of cape for your causes. And, I don't know that anybody was coming out being super excited with DK, or however you pronounce his name, from Florida there via Wisconsin. And then Ayo Manor is kind of interesting. I don't know how he kind of fared in your model, but just as far as the competition for Restrepo to get on the field, obviously going to be a slot.
And Ayo Manor is and Ayo Manor, I don't know how to say his name.
Ayo Manor,
he is a very interesting case in my model, and he is a player that I think is highly, like he ended up getting way underdrafted, right? I think that he belonged a lot higher. One of the things the model does not really take into consideration that maybe is a future upgrade I can make is like quarterback play, right? The model doesn't necessarily care too much about who your quarterback is. And Alec really never had a good quarterback his entire college career.
Right.
And I think, throw him with the number 1 overall pick in Cam Ward, and you might have some magic happening with Alec. And honestly, Alec might be the number 1 reason that Restrepo doesn't see the field. So
yeah. I would wonder if DK or whatever his name is maybe a little bit more in the slot, and Ayo Manor stays out wide. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But what did the model really like about Restrepo?
Yeah, I mean, the model just liked, in general, he was an incredibly important, contributor to his team winning. He had a 75th percentile WAA, wins above average. He had one of the better route versatilities, I believe, in all of the draft class. I don't have it pulled up right now, but I would be willing to bet he does. And in general, the model... So one of the things that I included in the model is that it predicts your athleticism based off of how you played during college, and a few other factors, your height, weight, other things like that. And he had a better predicted athleticism than his actual athleticism. And even his RAS, his relative athletic score, really wasn't awful. It was just he was slow, right? He was just slow, but his other athletic abilities aren't awful. And so the model really liked that kind of, route versatility by him. He had the 4th best route versatility in the entire class. Funny enough, Chimeri DK, I think that's how you say his name. He had the best route versatility, funny enough. So the Titans must be really interested in route versatility this year.
Yeah. Maybe they were on your model.
Yeah. And Restrepo also had, almost a 90th percentile score in yards per route run over expectation, which is another stat I created, which is basically just yards per route run based on the competition that you're playing against and based on your teammate quality. So do you have a lot of really good teammates, and are you playing against really good competition? And I used that and standardized the yards per route run, and then created an over expectation with it.
Yeah, so I mean,
totally understood all that.
Grab yourself some Restrepo, because again, this
he's free. Yeah, I mean, he's basically
5'11" in the ADP.
Yeah, he's super free, and all he did was go out there and produce and be a really, really strong route runner. And he doesn't look like he's in molasses on the field. He's just not a great runner in a straight line. In a speed
underwear.
Yeah.
So. I think one of the things I would love, I actually don't have any information on this, even though I have proprietary PFF data, is one of the things that came with Puka Nacua is he had like a 99th percentile PFF GAS score, game athleticism score, right? I would be very curious as to what Xavier Restrepo's is to basically invalidate his 4.840.
Right.
And I'd be very interested to see, how that affects his future NFL play.
Yeah. All right. Xavier Restrepo, the sleeper pick of the model here. So, all right.
Any tight ends you want to touch on real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I think, I have a separate tight end model that is also very good. 0.55 R squared. Tight ends are slightly easier to predict, though the model itself is a little bit harder to create because there's just less tight ends, right? Less productive tight ends. There's just less in general. But one of the players my models loved before the draft was Terrance Ferguson, right? And now that the draft has happened, I like Terrance Ferguson way more. Even at his ADP, I love it. I don't know what y'all have him at as your ADP, but I think,
I was to say right back into the second round, tight end premium.
Yeah, I think that is getting him there feels like cheating. I strongly prefer Terrance Ferguson over someone like Mason Taylor, even though I do I watched a lot of SEC football coming from Georgia. I liked watching Mason Taylor play. My models did not love him, but I thought he was a good player as I watched him play. But Terrance Ferguson, I think, is a stud to get at the end of the second round.
Yeah.
And I would have thought that before the draft, and now I think it way more after he got fantastic draft capital.
Right, and an interesting landing spot. Not a huge known feature of the tight end position, the Rams offense per se, but
Higbee gets it in sometimes.
There's certainly some opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think with with I guess the evolution of the Rams offense, they might start featuring the tight end a little bit.
Right.
With, investing that kind of draft capital in him. And
yeah, for sure. They've been seemingly kind of looking for it. They had Higbee. He's been banged up, and then they've thrown some other guys in there that have had some spike weeks here or there. So, you throw a guy like this in here who
they lost Kupp, so when they operate in the middle of the field a lot.
Feel like Ferguson has a lot of versatility in the way that he can kind of operate. So yeah. Like it.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then one more to give you, another, I think UDFA, Oronde Gadsden.
Fifth round pick to the Chargers.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my bad. And so Oronde Gadsden.
Love Oronde Gadsden. So you can
go sell him short.
He actually had the best production profile out of any tight end in my model for this year. Right above Colston Loveland, right? Like right above him. They're right beside each other. But Oronde really has pretty much everything you'd like to see, except my model didn't love his explosiveness. He only scored a 25th percentile in explosiveness, and his BCRs weren't super great. But every other thing he did on the field, my model liked. Right, he only got about a 50th percentile, but for a fifth round pick, that's pretty good. Right? It's pretty solid. And
he did rank second in explosive plays in 2024.
Yeah,
so that's
it's about age and everything else.
It's not just one stat, Jason.
It's not just one stat, right? It's everything.
He's essentially also a receiver, wide receiver that just kind of started playing the tight end position.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that relative to where he's going in dynasty drafts, in my last two drafts I did in leagues, I don't even think he went in the first three rounds. He's basically free. And I think that if you got an extra roster spot, especially in a tight end premium league, why not?
Sure.
501 in our ADP.
I mean, he's on my team every time in tight end premium, every single time. So, all right.